Such a delicate touch.
Sheer magnetism, Danny.
Although Roger Moore's portrayal of Bond was much more light-hearted and tongue-in-cheek than Connery's version, he enjoyed an overall easy acceptance by audiences, fans and critics. And Live and Let Die, his debuting Bond film, had been a box office success. So the studios asked the producers to quickly start working on the next Bond movie already. So for the last time in history, a Bond film would be released in a consecutive year, because right after Live and Let Die, production immediately started on The Man with the Golden Gun. The Man with the Golden Gun was Ian Fleming's final novel that was published in 1965, 8 months after Fleming's death. Because Fleming never had the time to fully polish up the book, it was often seen as one of the weaker novels. But for quite some time now, the filmmakers were adapting the novels very loosely anyway, and they originally had wanted to film Golden Gun many times before. Even as far back as 1966, there were plans for it to follow up You Only Live Twice. So it had been shelved a couple of times, but it would ultimately become the 9th Bond movie. Lots of locations were considered for the film. Where the novel was mostly set in Jamaica, the filmmakers thought of taking this film to Beirut or Iran, but that was changed to Southeast Asia, where the film was to be set in Thailand, Hong Kong and Macau. For the 4th and final time, director Guy Hamilton returned to bring a James Bond adventure to the big screen, and in December 1974, The Man with the Golden Gun was released. How did it do, and was it any good? Allow me to once again share my personal thoughts as I talk you through the movie. Roger Moore returns in the skin of Agent 007 as the gun barrel warms us up for another adventure. As the film starts, we immediately get introduced to our main villain, the man with the golden gun himself, Francisco Scaramanga, who is played by none other than world-famous actor Christopher Lee, who, by the way, happened to be Ian Fleming's cousin, and he's the world's best assassin who charges $1 million for each hit, a lethal man who has 3 nipples. There's also his little midget servant Knick-Knack and his mistress Andrea Anders, played by Hervé Villechaize and Maud Adams respectively. So Scaramanga is chilling on his private island enjoying the good life while Knick-Knack secretly welcomes a guest, the gangster from Diamonds Are Forever.
I didn't know there was a pool down there.
So the gangster gets a payment to try and kill Scaramanga while he is completely unaware of this. The gangster gets lured to Scaramanga's weird fun house where there are traps, mirrors and lifelike mannequins that even blink. And for Scaramanga, these unexpected visits are just regular training days to keep him in shape. So of course it ends with Scaramanga reaching his signature golden gun and killing the gangster. And the golden gun, by the way, is really inventive. Watching this movie as a kid, I thought it was the coolest gun ever. I mean, it's made out of daily objects like a pen, a cigarette case, a lighter and even cufflinks. It's awesome. Oh, and Scaramanga also happens to have a James Bond mannequin in his funhouse. I wonder which body part that 5th bullet hit. It certainly wasn't his thumb. And that fires us into the opening titles. And if you don't count the Bond mannequin, this once again was another pre-title sequence not to actually include James Bond himself. But I have to say, it's not a bad opening at all. It immediately warms us up to the nemesis Bond will be facing in his adventure, and it immediately manages to grab my attention. The opening song by Lulu is often claimed to be one of the worst ones in the series, mainly due to the lyrics.
He has a powerful weapon. He charges $1 million a shot. An assassin that's second to none. The man with the golden gun.
But really though, if you think about it, this is at least one of the few Bond songs where the lyrics actually make sense. His eye may be on you or me, or will he bang? We shall see. I mean, yeah, the lyrics totally make sense to me. So after the opening titles, Bond is seen at the MI6 office where M asks him what he knows about the man with the golden gun, and Bond pauses and proceeds into encyclopedia mode and literally rambles out every known fact about him, which is a typical Roger Moore Bond thing to do. So it appears Scaramanga has sent out a bullet with his number on it to show that Bond has become his next target, and that causes M to relieve him from his present assignment, which has something to do with the energy crisis, which was a recent thing going on at the time too. So Bond hints to M that if he were to find Scaramanga first before he finds him, that would change things up. So Bond gets to go on leave to find Scaramanga, and that basically sums up the plot for the entire movie: the world's greatest assassin versus Britain's finest secret agents. It's simple, it's different, but if you ask me, it's great. So Bond asks Moneypenny where Agent 002 was killed by Scaramanga, and he is given the necessary info, and off he goes to Beirut, and he tracks down the bullet that killed 002 in the belly button of a belly dancer who was a girlfriend of 002, and she kept the bullet he was killed with as a lucky charm, which is weird and completely implausible, but hey, I'll just accept that this is the way Bond tracks down the bullet. Equally as implausible is the way this chick just immediately falls for Bond's charms, even though he just randomly starts kissing her belly out of nowhere, but some guards show up and a small fight follows, which includes the infamous moment where the crew's camera is visible in the mirror. Every Bond fan will point it out to you if you watch this movie with them. But anyway, Bond retrieves the bullet and brings it to Q so he can track down where the bullet came from. But seriously though, couldn't Bond just use the bullet that was sent to him back at M's office instead of going back and forth to Beirut to retrieve this bullet from the belly dancer? I guess that would have been too easy. Anyway, Q finds out that the bullet came from a specialized gun maker named Lazar from Macau. So off Bond goes to Macau to meet up with this gun maker, and there's a cool moment where Bond threatens Lazar into telling him where he delivers Scaramanga's golden bullets to.
Bullets do not kill. It is the finger that pulls the trigger.
Exactly. I'm now aiming precisely at your groin. Says speak, or forever hold your peace.
So Lazar tells Bond he delivers Scaramanga's bullets in a casino, so Bond goes there and sees how Lazar makes the delivery and how Scaramanga's mistress Andrea picks them up. So he starts tailing her, and while he does that he runs into this movie's Bond girl, fellow British agent Mary Goodnight, played by Britt Eklund.
A green rose?
A green Rolls Royce. There can't be that many in Hong Kong.
And she's just annoying and stupid. But to be fair, her character is supposed to be annoying and stupid, so in that regard she does do well with the role. So Bond follows Andrea into her hotel room and just starts creeping up on her while she's taking a shower, and Moore manages to pull it off in his usual humoristic way.
A water pistol?
Despite Moore's usual light-hearted style, however, it's also here that we get to see one of the rare moments in the franchise where it's clear the filmmakers were still reeking back to Connery's Bond in the writing sometimes, as Moore tries to break Andrea's arm to get information, which, fair enough, does at least give him some rare toughness, but when he starts slapping her around after that, it just falls flat. It just doesn't work with Moore, where Connery had the ability to slap women around while still somehow remaining charming and likable. Moore just comes off as a dick when he does it. Charming women into giving him the information he requires just suits his Bond a lot better. Anyway, Bond finds out she's Scaramanga's mistress and he forces him into telling her where he can find him, which is at the Bottoms Up Club. But when Bond gets over there, Scaramanga actually has the advantage on him. He can clearly shoot Bond down, but he shoots down another guy instead, which is revealed to be a man named Gibson, who is a solar expert involved with Bond's original mission of the energy crisis that he got relief from in the beginning of the film. And Knick-Knack shows up and steals a Solex agitator from the dead body, which is a key component of a solar power station, which all of a sudden has been added to the plot. And then out of nowhere some guys show up who claim to be cops and arrest Bond, and clearly they aren't really cops because they act all suspicious and don't want to show their identification, and they take Bond on a boat. And meanwhile Scaramanga rubs his golden gun around Andrea's face because yeah, I don't really know why, it's just awkward. It shows us some character insights of Scaramanga and all, but when watching this scene with my girlfriend, I can't help but feel like I'm really getting judged right there that I like Bond films. But anyway, Bond was on that boat with the fake cop who still doesn't want to reveal who he's really working for, so Bond decides to bail out on the sunken ship, the Queen Elizabeth, but then it turns out that actually is where the fake cop wanted to take him to.
Welcome aboard, Commander Bond.
So the Queen Elizabeth wreckage is actually used as a covert base for MI6 and M and Q, and everybody is inside there. And fake cop guy turns out to be a new ally by the name of Lieutenant Hip. And Hip is a moron. I mean, couldn't he, I don't know, at least hint to Bond that he was a good guy by just saying something like, "Hey, don't worry Bond, we're on the same side. Heard your wife got killed a few years ago. That sucks, bro." But no, nothing. It's like he couldn't wait to see how surprised Bond would be that there is a hidden base inside the sunken ship. But yes, the interior sets of this sunken ships, by the way, are really inventive. It's a typical Bond unexpected thing and it's just great. So M is pissed at Bond and Hip that they have no leads and that the Solex agitator is gone, which again is like a second plot point now. But Bond says that he can't be on Scaramanga's hit list since Scaramanga had a clear shot on him that night, but didn't go for it. And he also explains that since Scaramanga asked $1 million for each hit, they just need to find a rich guy who has the money to spend who could have possibly hired Scaramanga to kill Gibson. So that ties rich and powerful man Mr. High Fat in Bangkok to the plot. So Bond goes to Bangkok to visit High Fat, posing as Scaramanga, since nobody knows what Scaramanga looks like anyway. And at High Fat's place he runs into this chick.
In and find out.
Sounds very tempting, Miss,
To me.
really?
And she's really just there for having a gag with someone with a suggestive name, but she's naked, so you know, that's nice. And then High Fat himself shows up, about to send Bond off his property. But fortunately, Q has issued Bond with his most sophisticated high-tech disguise yet. A nipple. Yeah, take that, Ethan Hunt, eat your heart out. So now High Fat thinks that he's Scaramanga and says that he thought that they agreed to never meet face to face, but now invites him over for dinner anyway. But we find out that the real Scaramanga once again had the edge on Bond, as he actually did meet High Fat in real life, so Bond has kind of made a fool out of himself. So in the night, Bond visits High Fat's place to come over for dinner, and Hip gives him a lift over to his place, since he's already giving his nieces a lift. But when Bond gets on the property, there are all kinds of weird statues there, and Knick-Knack appears to be dressed up as one of the statues, and two sumo wrestlers are there too, like literally waiting for people they can squeeze, and Bond is knocked out pretty easily, and then out of nowhere this happens.
This is my home. Take Mr. Bond to school.
And all of a sudden, we're in the middle of a karate school. Because during the time of filming, karate films were like the hip thing of the moment. Kinda like how blaxploitation was a thing in the previous film. So it's shoehorned in for the sake of it. And you know that when you see these Asians with freaking katanas fighting and killing each other, that Bond is pretty much fucked. But when Bond steps into the arena, he does this cheap trick of kicking the guy in the face, which is probably something Roger Moore thought of himself. So he got lucky in the first match, but then Bond has to face this dude, and you know he doesn't stand a chance, because, you know, this guy looks cocky, and his outfit is black. So yeah, not a chance. So instead of trying to win the fight, Bond just goes screw this and jumps through a wall where at the exact time and place, Hip and his nieces just happen to be driving around and the entire karate school comes after them. But his nieces are revealed to be Teenage Mutant Ninja nieces and kick the shit out of everyone. And after that, more weird stuff happens as Hip and the girls get in the car and they just totally forget to take Bond with them. I mean, why the hell does that happen? Do they think Bond is already in the car and just drive off? The nieces seem to be aware of this and they scream in their language to Hip that they forgot Bond. So again, Hip is a moron. So now that Bond is left behind, he is forced to steal a boat and sail off, and we get lots of tacky stuff in this scene. Like a little kid swimming around trying to sell an elephant statue and Bond throwing him into the water, which Roger Moore is always expressing his apologies for because he's ambassador for UNICEF now and stuff, but that little dipshit deserved it. But it's also here that a familiar character turns up.
J.W. Hub.
You just try that in my bayou, boy! I'd hold your ass!
Yup, Sheriff W. Pepper from the Louisiana State Police pops up once again, and it makes zero sense for this racist redneck to be on holidays in Bangkok of all places, but for some reason, because it's so out of place to have him return here, it's almost so bad that it's funny. I mean, I know I called him annoying in my Live and Let Die review, and there he was at least in actual context, but here I find it more ironic that he's here, and for some reason I find him funnier in this movie.
If you got your little pointy heads out of them pajamas, you wouldn't be late for work.
Meanwhile, Hi-Fat gets killed by Scaramanga with his golden gun and he takes the Soul Axe, which is a cool moment. And Bond is reunited with Mary Goodnight at some hotel. And Goodnight totally wants Bond to bang her.
If Hip doesn't come up with the lead, there's really nothing very much for us to do tonight. Or is there?
Oh, darling, I'm tempted. But killing a few hours as one of your passing fancies isn't quite my scene.
Wait, a Bond girl in a Roger Moore Bond film that plays hard to get? Wow, now that is rare.
Good night, what a pleasant surprise.
My hard to get act didn't last very long, did it?
Aw, damn it, Goodnight. Where's your self-respect? I mean, that woman wants the D so badly you couldn't dry her up with a hairdryer. So Bond, of course, just rolls with it, but then Andrea walks into Bond's room, so Bond has to hide Goodnight under the sheets. And Andrea tells Bond it was her who sent him the bullet in the beginning of the movie, since she's essentially a prisoner of Scaramanga because she could never leave him without being killed. So she asks Bond to kill him, and even tells Bond he can have sex with her in exchange. Yeah, it's not exactly a deal Bond has to think twice about. Heck, Bond even demands that he can have the Soul Axe too as a bonus. I mean, in this position he could pretty much have a threesome if he wants to too. So he decides to go for Andrea first, you know, since she's likeliest to die at some point. So he just shoves Goodnight in a closet when Andrea is undressing, and he starts banging her while Goodnight is forced to listen and wait in there. I mean, take note of these clever tactics that Bond is showcasing here, gentlemen. They may be useful to use someday.
You mean I've been in here for 2 hours?
All in the line of duty. Forgive me, darling. Your turn will come, I promise.
And I know for today's standards, feminists would bash the shit out of a scene like this, but these are the 70s, man, and I always just piss myself laughing at that line. Gotta love Roger Moore in those moments. So because Bond has banged Andrea, she has agreed to give him the Soul Axe now, and they would meet up at the Muay Thai venue the next day. But it turns out Andrea is killed by Scaramanga, and I have to say this has to be the most lively corpse I have ever seen in a movie. I mean, she's shot in the freaking chest, yet her head is somehow still, you know, up, like she froze to death by a gunshot or something. And then Scaramanga shows up and sits down next to Bond, and Christopher Lee is quite good in this scene, displaying a sort of charismatic scariness. Also, Knick Knack is revealed to be behind Bond with a gun, eating peanuts. And Scaramanga talks about his life story, which is directly taken from the novel, and Bond all of a sudden spots the Soul Axe on the ground, which apparently Scaramanga has completely missed and is clueless about. But yeah, Bond picks it up in a sneaky way and gives it to Hip, who is undercover as a peanut guy. Scaramanga tells Bond he holds no grudge against him and hopes their paths never cross again, and he leaves. But oh well, Bond gave the Solex to Hip, so his mission is pretty much complete, right? And then Hip gives the Solex to Goodnight, because Hip is a moron. Of course, Goodnight screws up in a matter of like 2 minutes as he wants to place a homing device on Scaramanga's car and gets thrown in the boot with the Solex. And when Bond and Hip want to chase her, they also find out that she has the car keys with her too. Damn it, Goodnight. But at least Bond starts chasing her alone, so thank goodness there's no more Hip. So Bond runs to an AMC dealership to steal a car where Sheriff Pepper just happens to be in the passenger seat at the exact same time and place. And we get a pretty standard chase sequence with some tacky humor thrown in with Sheriff Pepper.
Now, I know you!
Oh, no.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
It's also in this sequence where the movie's biggest set-piece stunt is performed, where Bond does this amazing flip, but unfortunately is completely ruined or better yet, destroyed by a stupid sound effect. It's one of the biggest score disappointments on which all of us Bond fans seem to agree on. I mean, the stunt is good, it's insane, they did it in one take, but the slide whistle sound, which is even done by John Barry of all people, the god of Bond composers, it's just an absolute shame. I mean, come on John, even I can do better with this scene.
Not thinking this. I sure am, boy.
Never heard of Evel Knievel?
See, it's not that hard. Anyway, Scaramanga, who still has Goodnight in the boot, is getting away into this abandoned barn where he transforms his car into a plane and flies off.
What's the matter? Ain't none of you porty heads ever seen an airplane before?
So back at the Covert HQ, M is ridiculously pissed. I mean, he's even mad at Q.
Oh, that's perfectly feasible, sir. As a matter of fact, we're working on one now.
Oh, Q, shut up.
To enable...
Oh, shut up, Q.
I mean, chill out, M. We know the Solex has become a plot point all of a sudden, but it's not like we actually really know why it's that important. And why the hell is it all Q's fault? The man knows how to make decent nipples, damn it. But fortunately, Goodnight has the tracking device in Scaramanga's boot, and Bond can track her down to his island. So Bond takes a plane and flies over to the Red Chinese territories to Scaramanga's Island, which by the way has to be one of my favorite villain lairs in the franchise. I mean, this was just a remote island in Thailand back when they made the film, but to this very day it has been dubbed James Bond Island and it's attracting hundreds of tourists daily who are still visiting it because of this movie. So Bond lands there and Scaramanga welcomes him with open arms.
Dom Pérignon 64.
I prefer the 62 myself.
And I might be overanalyzing here, but the Dom Pérignon Scaramanga gives him is from 1964, the year of the third Bond film, and Bond says he prefers the 62, the year of the first Bond film.
That's a Dom Pérignon 55. It would be a pity to break it. I prefer the 53 myself.
So back in Dr. No they made a similar remark, and the 55 is the year of the third Bond novel, and the 53 that Bond prefers is the year of the first Bond novel. Complete useless trivia I discovered by myself, but I haven't seen it being pointed out before, so you know, there's that. Anyway, Scaramanga gives Bond a tour of his island and his high-tech solar power plant he has hidden there, which has all the essential needs for an average Bond villain. You know, dangerous boiling waters where you know you're not supposed to fall into but someone totally will, and danger signs, and even a laser. It also appears the Solex actually got some meaning, as that little thing is powering up using solar energy, which is transferred into, a light beam, I guess, and the actual laser too, which allows Scaramanga to shoot Bond's plane. And I swear, every time I see this movie, I always expect an actual visible laser here, but then I'm always surprised that there isn't one. It's just like they completely forgot to edit it in or something. Anyway, visiting a Bond villain wouldn't be complete without having a lovely lunch. So Goodnight is there too, who is mainly just a hot bimbo in a bikini now, and there's some good dialogue between the two and they agree to kill each other, you know, after lunch. So an old-fashioned pistol duel follows, Bond's Walter PPK versus Scaramanga's single bullet golden gun, and it's actually a pretty exciting scene.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Much like the pre-title sequence with the gangster, Knick-Knack guides Bond to the fun house and oversees the whole thing while Scaramanga and Bond try to kill each other. Meanwhile, Goodnight is hanging out in Scaramanga's solar power plant where the guard totally looks like he wants to rape the shit out of her, and there's a bit of suspense when Bond loses his gun and such in the fun house, but it's a bit predictable that Bond eventually switches up with the mannequin Scaramanga has there of him and he shoots him that way. A predictable villain death, but it's still a pretty badass scene. Please don't ask me how he undressed the mannequin so quickly and put on those clothes and all that stuff though. But hey, at least nobody actually fall into one of those boiling water. Aw, damn it, Goodnight! So because that happened, now the whole island will explode and Bond still has to extract the Solax for his mission. And Goodnight is being more of a bimbo here. I mean, my goodness, whoever promoted her to become a field operative? She's terrible! But yes, after lots of annoying struggles with her, Bond gets the Solax and the pair flee to Scaramanga's boat and are about to sail off romantically. But of course, we almost forgot about the midget. And I haven't really talked about Knick-Knack much in this review actually, but I like him. He's one of the most memorable henchmen in the series and has some funny moments. It makes for an interesting fight scene where he just hides under the couch, but is soon enough captured into a suitcase and is trapped on top of the boat. And then, after waiting for it the whole movie, Goodnight gets what she wants.
She's just coming, sir.
Good night. Good night. Good night.
Good night, sir.
So the movie ends with the usual gag, but also with a pretty badass version of the title song.
Good night, good night. Sleep well, my dear. No need to fear. James Bond is here.
The Man with the Golden Gun is often called out to be among the weakest and dullest Bond films in the franchise, mainly because of its small scope and boring plot. While I agree compared to the likes of Goldfinger, Thunderball or You Only Live Twice, which all came out years before this one feels very small and low-key, arguably the smallest in the whole franchise, but I honestly don't find it to be a boring Bond film. I am among the few people who actually prefers this film over Live and Let Die. I like the simple story of Bond going up against the world's best assassin, and come on man, the villain is Christopher Lee, the guy is a legend, and the Golden Gun is just awesome. Though admittedly action-wise Live and Let Die had a lot more to offer, but that doesn't mean this movie can't entertain. The plot is simple enough to keep me entertained and there's some decent humor and Roger Moore has some funny moments again, Maud Adams is pretty good and Knick-Knack is memorable and well, Goodnight is just stupid, but that's the way her character is written, so you can't really fault Brig Atlan for it, she just did fine with what was given to her for the role. And yes, the movie has its flaws, in particular the slide whistle sound effect put over the amazing stunt, and that moron hip driving off leaving Bond behind at the karate school for no reason, so by no means do I rank this film in my personal top 10 Bond movies, because the franchise definitely has a lot of better entries to offer, but to me it's definitely not nearly as boring or weak as a lot of people make it out to be.